Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting all about happiness. So what is happiness and two different types of happiness, how to benchmark your current happiness and improve your overall happiness, and how happiness can improve your romantic relationship. But before we get into that, what's been fueling you up this week?
Oh, I think the thing that probably fueled me up the most is one of my best friends in the world had her third baby.
Amazing.
Yeah, and shout out to Rach and Nick. Congratulations. But we're stuck in New South Wales lockdown and she's in South Australia. But it was kind of the gift of technology that we could FaceTime from the hospital, brand new, tiny little baby. And it's just really nice to feel connected to the people that you love. Yeah, so that was probably the highlight of my lockdown week.
Yeah, amazing.
What about you, Nath? What fueled you up this week?
Diving into some projects that I've had on park for quite a long time. So I spent a big chunk of Saturday, obviously being locked down in the house, but was able to get down into the garage and do a couple of my bike projects that I've been planning for quite a while. So got to pull one of my bikes apart and completely rebuild it and service it and get it all nice and shiny and clean and give it a breath of new life. So I'm keen to actually be able to now get out and ride it, but that'll come soon enough.
Can I add one more?
For sure.
Yeah. If you follow us on the gram, you will have seen that we hit 8,000 unique downloads last week.
I know, that was going to be my other one too.
Yes, yes. And to some people, that might be a really tiny number. And it is. In the scheme of the world, it's a tiny number. But for us, the idea that 8,000 of you have listened into the show and what we care about and what our guests care about and joining us on this mission of better relationships equaling a better world. So thank you so much for everybody listening, downloading, sharing, subscribing, all the things. Keep it up.
Yeah, thanks so much. And we also had our biggest listen week ever last week, which is pretty exciting, and just to see the growth of it too. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we've got plenty more to come. But now let's get into this week's episode.
Today we've got Declan Edwards joining us. He is a happiness researcher, a thought leader in the field of wellbeing, and founder of BU Coaching, an organisation that is growing global wellbeing by empowering people with the tools and the team to thrive. He's an avid believer in the potential of people. Declan has seen firsthand that when people are equipped with the strategies to manage their emotions and master their mindset, they make a positive impact not only in their own lives, but also in the lives of others around them. It is this impact that he is passionate about spreading. As a published author, podcast host, and international keynote speaker, Declan is actively bringing the skill set of well-being back to the people and creating a world where people can thrive. When he isn't working, you'll find him hiking, spending quality time with his wife, or chocolate staffy Teddy, or you'll find him performing acoustic covers of R&B and rap classics. Welcome to the show, Declan.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That paints such a rad picture of who you are.
Thank you.
It sounds like there's plenty of things in there that'll keep you happy.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I think leaning into some good quality connection in there, and of course, hobbies and passions. When people read it out, it's funny when people introduce me like that. One of the most common questions I get asked is like, "Did you bring a guitar to do an acoustic cover of a rap song?" I was like, maybe next podcast. Let's talk about happiness today.
Yeah. So, what is happiness?
Oh, it's such a big question. I love it. Let's start with the big ones first. Why not? So this is one of the most common questions I get asked by people, like, what is happiness? What's it mean? I'm first to say, as a heads up to everyone listening to this, I do not believe there is a one-size-fits-all answer to happiness. I don't think anyone, myself included, as a happiness researcher, can go, hey, this is the box that everyone needs to fit in to live a happy and fulfilled life. But what I can say is there's commonalities to happiness. And what we know is that there's actually two different types of happiness, which most people don't realize. So there's your hedonic happiness, which is the big yellow smiley face, sort of dopamine driven, fleeting happiness. It goes up quick, it goes down quick. That's what you get when you have a nice bowl of ice cream or you watch a funny movie, or it's that real spike of happiness that most people think of when they think of happiness. What a lot of people miss when they think of happiness is this other type called eudaimonic happiness, which is based on a Greek word called eudaimonia. It basically means contentment and meaning and purpose. So whereas one is kind of like the fun life is the hedonic happiness, we have the good and meaningful life, and that eudaimonic. And it's a little bit steady to go up, but it stays for a lot longer. And interestingly enough, one of the biggest contributors to eudaimonic happiness, quality relationships. Our connection to others.
Amazing. And that's why you're here. Hey, so we mentioned your wife in the intro. Tell us a little bit about your relationship.
Yeah. So, where do I start? So we first connected at high school. I don't know if you can call us high school sweethearts. We didn't technically date in high school. I asked her out when I was in year 11. She was in year 10. And she said, yeah, we should go on a date. And I was so overwhelmed by the fact that someone I fancied had said yes to me that I then got scared and never organized the date. And years went by, and I'm now in university. She's finishing up high school. And we reconnected at a friend's party, and we're like, hey, we never went on that date. We've gone off and dated other people, and we went, hey, we never went on that date, did we? And then we organized, and I suppose, as you'd say, the rest is history. So how long have we been together for now? Close to 9 years, married for nearly 5. Yeah, I'm very grateful. She's someone who I remember saying to her a few years ago, which may be a little bit controversial, but I remember saying, I was like, I don't need this relationship in my life to be happy, but I'm choosing to be in it because it adds beauty and complexity to my life that's not there otherwise. And so I think what we were clear on as we grew together, because we've been in this relationship together, essentially as we figured out who we were as adults, as we figured out what it meant to be independent, as we figured out what it meant to go through our 20s and start setting goals for our life, what we wanted to be clear on is not losing our sense of identity and self in that marriage and still having things that mattered to us. So that way, when we were together as a couple, it's from a place of choice rather than necessity. And that's been a big thing for us as a couple to work on together, and has presented its own challenges and growth opportunities, but something I'm deeply grateful for, that we both see the value and importance of that.
Yeah. Your story sounds super similar to ours. We went to high school together. We were mates at high school, and then spent a year, similar sort of age gap, year or two apart. Yeah. Then we moved in together as housemates.
No way.
Yeah, and then we fell in love. And yeah, so we've very similar that we've been through our 20s together and now in our early 30s. And lots of people have made those kind of comments about like, oh, but you were so young. Like, did you really figure out who you were? Did you really know who you were then to make that kind of decision that was who you wanted to be with? And I always kind of reflect on it, and I think like, I don't ever want to be done being the person that I am. Like, I imagine that the person I was at 25 versus 35 versus 45 versus 55 will be different, and I want it to be different. So when would ever be the done, you know who you are, forever and ever kind of stage to meet your person, fall in love, step into love, and choose happily ever after?
But I think you touched on it there too, though, that it is a choice to continue choosing to be together as well. And it's not just a choice on your wedding day or whatever to go, oh, yeah, I'm choosing to marry you. It is a continual choice, and you can keep reflecting back on that and going, do I still choose to be with you? And are we still like excited by each other and things like that too?
Yeah, 100%. And I love that you mentioned like the idea of who I am now is different to who I was 5 years ago. And I hope that continues. I agree. But funnily enough, it was something that I missed early in our relationship. And I remember working with one of my coaches early on. So, I've been running a happiness college now for 5 years, but I've been working on my own happiness and personal development, emotional well-being for close to 9. And I remember complaining to one of my coaches one time. I was like, we were going through a bit of a rough patch in our relationship. My wife's called Siobhan. So Siobhan and I'm going to call her Chev. So Chev and I were going through a bit of a rough patch in our relationship, and we were digging down trying to figure out why. And I was working with my coach, and I ended up saying to him, I'll never forget it. I looked at him and said, she's not the girl that I first fell in love with. And he looked at me and went, no shit, Sherlock, you're not the same dude that she fell in love with. He's like, are you telling me you haven't changed in 5 years? Are you kidding? And I was like, oh, man, like when you put it that way. And
damn.
Yeah, right? I was like, I'm so busy holding this idea of who she's meant to be or who she was. that I'd missed so much beauty in growth and in how she'd changed and grown as an individual. And now it's almost like I'm falling in love with her over and over and over and over again because it's a different version of her each year. Right? I think that's beautiful, but so often we lose sight of that, I feel.
Yeah. And I think we've always said too that we're on to probably our third or fourth relationship or marriage or something like that. Just 3 different stages of life. Like we went through the real poor uni student kind of
Partying
somehow ate out every night and at that phase of life, and then
first jobs and first grown up, early stage career.
And then actual marriage, I think, too. And then I think moving to Sydney as well and kind of embracing some more of the life that we really wanted to build. Like so it's probably been like 4 marriages or 4 different lives in there. And it's going to continue as well. Like it doesn't mean that it's now stopped or that it's ever going to like settle down necessarily. I think there's always different growth and different phases that we go through.
And I think it's beautiful to see that and to evaluate and reconsider. It's rare, but it's always nice when it happens, when we see 2 individuals who are in a relationship together come into the happiness college as individuals to work on themselves, but then that inevitably spills over into their relationship. It's funny that you mentioned that those chapters are going to keep changing throughout life, because we were talking with some of our members the other day too, who are in a relationship, and they recognize that they built so much of this chapter of their relationship and their marriage around being parents. And they're now at the stage of their life where their kids are getting ready to move out of home. And so for them, there's that confronting, this is the main leg that we have built this marriage around for 20 years now. And it's not saying that leg's going to go, but it's not going to be as primarily, present as it was. So now what are we building this marriage around? And I think that's so exciting that they get to do that now proactively rather than reactively and go, okay, well, what are we building this marriage and this relationship around as we grow forward in our life and go through the next chapter, rather than getting 10, 15 years down the line and going, oh, we don't feel connected. We don't have much that we align with anymore. What are we going to do about this?
So before I want to dig a little bit more into your relationship with Chev, but you've mentioned it there that you run a college and a school for happiness. So tell us a little bit about BU coaching, what you do and who you help.
Yeah, 100%. So what we do, as the name suggests, we're a happiness college, even to the point of, we have people in freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. Depending on who their head coach is, they're on Alpha Mu Iota or they're on Delta Epsilon. The inner American in me just went all at it. But the reason we exist and why I started it was, from our perspective, a lot of the skills and tools and strategies required to live a happy, fulfilling, meaningful life are the tools and skills that are often called soft skills traditionally, which, first and foremost, I think it's a terrible name for them because it undervalues them. I'm going to call them human skills, right? They're the skills that make us human. It's emotional intelligence, it's communication, it's leadership, it's resilience, it's things that really matter. And we don't often get taught them in school or in workplaces. So from our perspective, as I learned more about this for myself, I had a history of really struggling with my mental health, struggling with body image, struggling with my own sense of purpose and meaning in life. As I started learning these things, I was like, this really helps. Why are we not taught this more? Why is there not more opportunity to learn this stuff and to lean into it? And so I remember saying to Chev, we were traveling throughout the US at the time, and we're getting ready to get back on the plane in LA and come back home. And I said to her, I was like, hey, that house deposit we've saved up? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, I kind of want to use it all starting a happiness college. And she's like, sorry, what? And I'm like, I want to use it all to start a happiness college. And thankfully for me, we had the plane ride home for me to convince her of the vision of it.
And she was strapped in next to you.
She couldn't get away.
Had nothing to do but listen.
Exactly. Well, she could watch the movies on the in-flight entertainment system, but But we got back to Sydney. She went, hey, I think if this is something that really you believe in and matters to you, we should go for it. And again, I can't help but think we wouldn't be where we are today without Chev being the first person to sort of take that gamble and back us. And now, thanks to her, our college, we have members and graduates in 5 different countries. We work with workplaces, with happiness consulting, we work with individuals all around Australia and America, US, UK, Germany, we've got some members. And from us, we find the commonality with the people we work with. We call them the big 3, right? So the lost visionaries, people have a big idea for what they want to do in their life, but they're feeling a bit lost of where to go with it. The stressed out high achiever. So the person in the high achiever trap of always never enough. It's always like they keep going, I'll be happy when I get to this point. And as they get closer, they just move the bar. And they're always chasing this idea of perfection. They're chasing this high expectation on themselves. Or the overwhelmed and burnt out helper, which are the type of people who they give. Their greatest strength is they're loving, they're caring, they want to help their partner, their kids, their colleagues, their neighbor down the road, right? Someone that they pass on the street, but they're their lowest priority and they feel really guilty about looking after themselves. So as a result, they burn out. those are the three people that we've just found we really gel with and we get amazing results with, not only in their life, but I'm a huge believer that when we're happy and fulfilled and looking after ourselves, that ripples outwards, right? Like it does help our partners, it helps our kids, it helps our family, it helps our community when we start with ourselves.
I love this so much. And so much of what you've just shared in your story and the big idea and the big vision of making such an impact in a fundamental life skill is very similar to what has become our calling in terms of helping people create better relationships, because we had this realization that if people had grown up in family homes and dynamics where they had never actually seen a healthy, happy, thriving relationship modeled to them, where do you learn that? Because it's definitely not at school.
Yep. Yeah. And I love too, on a side note, because I checked out some of the stuff you guys are doing. I think this is something we have in common, the proactivity around it. Like, there's no way for shit to hit the fan. Like, for us, we're always like, don't wait until your mental health, your emotional well-being is at rock bottom to try and rebuild it. Start learning this stuff immediately. Same with our relationships. Don't wait till you guys are like absolutely resenting each other and at each other's throat. Like, let's start being intentional about this early.
Yeah. And you've nailed it. I'm so glad that our message is translating.
Hey, good.
Yeah. Hey, so happiness, I would say that one of my key moments of learning and growth around happiness being something that I have influence over was probably around 5 years ago. I read a book called The Happiness Advantage by a guy named Sean Aker.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. And this book changed my world. And then I made Nath read it. And then I fly the flag for this book and Sean's TED Talk, because the distilling an entire book into one sort of sentence, this idea that success doesn't create happiness, happiness creates success.
Mm-hmm.
And it changed my fucking world.
Yeah. And it's in nearly any area. That's the cool part about the research. Like, for so many people, we create what's called the hedonic treadmill, or I'll be happy when. And we've all done it. I still get caught on it sometimes, right? But it's like, I'll be happy when I'm in a relationship. I'll be happy when I lose 5 kilos. I'll be happy when I get a pay rise, when I get a new job, when I finally leave that relationship, when I have a kid, when the kids finally move out of home, right? That's like, happiness is always around the next corner. And it's exactly what you said. It's like, okay, well, when I get X, when I'm successful at whatever it is, then, and only then, will I be happy? What we know is that's not what happens, right? In fact, if anything, it just inches away and we're always chasing. What Sean did in his research, and a lot of other research in positive psychology, which is my background, does, which I love, is they're like, the equation's the wrong way around, guys. Like, when we are happy and fulfilled, we are more likely to show up as our best selves in our relationship, which means we are more likely to then have a good relationship. So it follows that way. When we are happy and content within ourselves, we're more likely to bring our best self to work, which means we're more likely to be recognized for what we do, which means we're more likely to get a pay rise and a promotion. Like, everything that we just said, when I get this, I'll be happy. If you flip it on its head, when I'm happier, I'm more likely to get that, makes the difference.
Yeah. So I would love to know, maybe from a personal perspective, what do you do for your own happiness? What are the practices and habits that you've got to help you keep this ticking along?
My big ones, I call them for me the ABCs because they're my personal ones. So authenticity, just being true to myself. Now, it's easy to put that on a bumper sticker or on an Instagram post, hashtag authentic, right? But what does that mean, right? For me, it's know what matters to me. Know what I stand for, know what I stand against, know what my values are and whether I'm living in alignment with them. That's a huge one, right? One of the best compliments people can give me is, you're the same guy no matter where I run into you. You're on a podcast, you're in a coaching session, you're catching up with friends, you're having dinner. Like, I'm getting the same experience, right? I spent a lot of my life being a human chameleon and trying to be what I thought everyone else wanted me to be. I was really good at holding up the masks. And that was a big part of what led to my struggles with my mental health journey earlier on, right? And so a huge one for me is like, okay, well, let's not do that because that put me in a really bad place. So let's be true to myself. The second big one, boundaries. So that's the B of the ABCs. I am a chronic and consistent overworker, and I'm very passionate about what I do, and that's a strength, and it's also one of my greatest weaknesses. And so for me, being extra intentional about setting boundaries around my work and career in particular, setting boundaries around technology and screen time, setting boundaries with people, setting boundaries even just with myself has been a huge game changer in my happiness.
Can you give us an example of one of those boundaries? Like, what does it look like in practice?
Yeah, so for me, a huge one with the boundaries was screen time. For me was a big one, and how contactable I am. I went in about a year ago, turned off all notifications on my phone, except for phone calls and texts. So there is no need for any of the apps on my phone to interrupt my day or interrupt quality time when I'm with someone, unless it's a phone call or a text and it's an emergency. Right? So I turn all them off. But a big boundary time-wise, I now no longer work after 7 p.m. I just don't take it. Whereas starting up the Happiness College in BU, I'd work nearly every hour under the sun. And I also don't work before 10 a.m. I have slow start mornings now, which I love. It's a bit more quality time to have with Chev and with our dog, and I can be a bit more intentional and slow in the morning, do a bit of exercise, a bit of intention setting for the day, not be in such a rush. So that's been a big boundary for me, is that sort of time zone. And then the third one to see is compassion. Compassion for myself, compassion for others, and sort of practicing, I guess in a way, balancing out that high achiever enthusiasm sort of drive that I have with, I call it balancing my inner monk and my inner CEO. Sometimes my CEO takes the wheel. It's like, we need to run 1,000 miles an hour and we're going to make big things happen. Again, great strength, but huge limitations. My inner monk is like, hey, it's all good, man. Let's slow down. Let's take some breathing room. You're doing fine. Like, it's a bit more patient with me. It's almost, the great saying with self-compassion is, how would you address this situation if it was your close friend in it? And a lot of us don't treat ourselves as we would our close friend. And I was huge for that. So those are the three that really stand out for me. I mean, the bonus fourth, which I recommend to everyone, this is the one that if someone says, if I could distill everything I've learned about the science of happiness into like one practice, what would be the one practice I'd tell everyone to do? And that's keep a gratitude journal.
Oh, yes, that was going to be mine. That's a game changer.
Huge.
It sounds so woo-woo when you've not done it before, but all of a sudden you're training your brain and the way that you look at the world to be incredibly different.
100%. I think there's been some studies that like within 12 weeks of writing down 3 things you're grateful for each day and why, that's the kicker. You have to write why you're grateful for them because that's what releases the neurochemicals associated with gratitude. I like to say that's when you get to marinate in it. You get to simmer in the sauce a bit, right? But doing 3-day and why for 12 weeks, up to 40% increase in self-reported happiness. It's huge. If I came to you and said, hey, here's something that makes you 40% happier, it's free and it takes 5 minutes a day. Like, why would we not all be doing that?
Lots of us are still not doing that.
And by the way, this is the compassion part that I just spoke about.
Yeah.
I tell people to do it every day. Do I do it every day? No. My metric of success, 80%. Like if I say to someone, look, this is a daily practice, we're all human. We're going to stuff up. We're going to have days that we forget. We're going to have days that we just don't feel like it. If 80% of the time you're doing a practice that's good for your happiness, you're going to feel pretty happy.
So you mentioned earlier, like your battles with mental health and stuff like that. So how did that actually kind of translate into this happiness project? Like, did you realize that you had an absence of happiness during that period, or like, how did it kind of all come about?
Yeah. So my big one for me was a combination of 2 things. So one was big struggles with body image for quite a long time and with my own self-esteem. And the other one was a bit of a distinct lack of purpose and meaning and direction in life. My father is very successful in the military. His father is very successful in the police force. His father was very successful in the military. His father was also in the military.
Oh,
there's a pattern
Declan.
here.
Yeah, there's...
Right?
Declan, you've pattern interrupted this generational...
Yeah. So from a very young age, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's my path in life is I'm just going to end up in the military or the police force. When I started getting into my teenage years, I was like, I don't think that's what I want to go down. That was really tough. You know, my father and I had a bit of a rough relationship. We didn't really connect for quite a few years in my teenage years. And I started to turn to food and a terrible relationship with food to make myself feel better. And so it was interesting because I knew I didn't want that path, but I had no idea what I did want because I was so busy trying to be that human chameleon. I was like, well, this person wants me to be this, and this time I'm meant to show up for this person. I had no idea who Declan was anymore behind all those masks. And I got stuck on the hedonic treadmill of the I'll be happy when. And so for me, it was I'll be happy when I lose 5 kilos. I just jumped on social media and started seeing guys with 6-packs by the beach looking pretty happy. And I went, that's why I'm not happy. I don't live by the beach and I don't have a 6-pack.
Yeah.
Yep.
So off I went trying to get the 6-pack. And in the course of a year, I lost about 40 kilos. By the end of that year, I was putting myself in and out of hospital with disordered eating. And my big turning point was I thought the way I felt about myself and how happy I was in life only affected me. So why did it matter? And I remember my mom coming into the hospital one day, and the doctors didn't know why I was losing weight because, I mean, talking about body image and self-esteem issues, like, it's way more common now, less common back then, but even less common to talk about it in relation to men.
Yeah.
Like, men with body image was just not a thing. They didn't talk about it. And I was good at not telling anyone. And I remember the doctor going, we're going to start testing for bowel cancer because we don't know why he's sick. And my mom broke down at the idea of losing her only son. And for me, it was a bit of a wake-up call that how I was treating myself, how I was thinking about myself, how I felt didn't just affect me. It affected those around me too. And that was the first time I opened up and reached out and told people that I wasn't eating and I was avoiding food. And I asked for help for the first time in my life. I went, I can't do this alone. And thankfully and luckily for me, I connected with an amazing man by the name of Sebastian Terry, who was actually based in Sydney at the time.
100 things.
100
Sebastian.
things.
Oh, I know
100 things
Sebastian.
Sebastian Terry. So he ended up being my first sort of unofficial mentor and coach. He was my first example of what it meant to create a life that aligned with me as an individual and to figure out who I was and what I cared about. We've formed a very close friendship now. We actually went to
Declan.
Everest Base Camp together. Yeah, him and I are very, very close now. But he was my first example of, hey, maybe I don't just have to follow in the footsteps of my father. Maybe I can figure out who I am. And that kicked off this journey of self-development, learning more about the science of happiness, well-being, purpose, and yeah, here I am all these years later now.
Dude,
Yeah,
thank you so
amazing.
much for sharing that with us. That's anybody who opens up and shares their dark days, their not so nice days, is courageous and is vulnerable, and it's amazing. But also, you've done it as a dude talking about an eating disorder that and body dysmorphia issues that is not a mainstream thing to be talking about. So I just want to honor you and say thank you so much for
Thank you.
going there with
I
us.
appreciate that. Thank you.
So how has happiness now shaped your relationship with yourself?
Oh, massively so. I mean, and this is the beautiful part of it, right? I think I'm never going to stop this journey. It's funny that I'll be happy when I'm now, like, from my perspective, what happiness means to me now is how can I be deeply content and fulfilled with who I am, where I am in this current chapter of my life, and have meaningful goals that I'm moving towards that matter to me. That's the balancing point, right? I think if I lean too far into one side or the other, it comes with drawbacks. But like, this nice little middle ground of like, actually, you know what? I'm really grateful and fulfilled and happy and content with who I am in this current moment and, you know, in this self and in this chapter of my life. And I've still got stuff that I'm super excited about. Like, I ain't done living yet. I got a lot that I want to do, right? That has really changed my approach to life, my outlook to life, and massively changed my relationship with myself and my body. Yeah, it's interesting taking a trip down memory lane, looking at where all this started to go, like I mentioned before, I said to you guys, one of the most common questions I get asked is, what is happiness? And the second most common question people ask me when they find out what I do for a living is, are you happy? And it's so nice to be able to genuinely say yes, right? And I think that's probably been the last 3 or so years has been, again, we're all human. I'm not saying I'm happy 100% of the time every day. That's not the goal, right? But I think I navigate the challenges of life a lot more effectively than I used to. I'm a lot more adaptable and flexible to life. I'm a lot more purpose-led and heart-led and just in a better place mentally, emotionally, physically, really across the board. And that's really been the last 3 years in particular when things have been really quite beautiful. And I don't think that's accidental. Like everyone I say, like, A, I'm not special. Like, right, if I can do this, anyone can with the right guidance and tools. B, I've never met someone who's accidentally fumbled their way into a life of happiness. I don't think it happens. I think there is this intentionality behind it. And I'm going to keep learning and growing and evolving and leaning into this for the rest of my life. Like, this journey has just begun for me.
Yeah.
So how has happiness then helped shape your romantic relationship too?
Many ways. I think by me learning more about myself, it gave me the space to be proactive and intentional about getting to understand Chev more, right? And so again, it comes back to that proactive versus reactive approach to relationships, where I shared with you guys earlier about, like, I had this idea of who Chev was meant to be based on the first version of her I met and the girl I fell in love with. I know couples that have held on to that for 30 years, right? For me, it was an issue for 3 or 4 months. And then I was like, hey, let's figure this out. And that's, I'm going to work with my coach about it. I'm going to debrief and let's work through this together. So we solve problems a lot quicker. But I think as well, there's funny in the current climate that we're all in, but there's a lot of research being done at the moment around emotional contagions. And what they're finding is emotions are contagious. And so when we are happy and fulfilled and we're putting ourselves in a good situation, we don't act like we think we do. We don't act from logic. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, I'm a pretty logical person. I do the right thing. I act from what's right. I'm like, that is such a lie, right? We act from emotion primarily, right? As a species, we are driven by if we feel good, we tend to do good behaviors, which leads to good outcomes. If we feel pretty crummy, and I'm the first to admit, I think we all can, we've all had days, right, where we're feeling pretty stressed and overwhelmed, and it leads us to take it out on our loved one, and they go, oh, that wasn't actually about them at all, right? And it's this little jarring point in the relationship. So I think how it's affected my marriage and my relationship with Chev, we have a deep appreciation for each other as individuals and how we grow as individuals, but also how we grow together as a couple. We navigate challenges, I think, a bit more gracefully than we otherwise would have. And we're able to lean on each other when someone is having a bit of a tougher moment or a tougher day. We sort of lean on those emotional contagions to be like, okay, well, how can I be the leader in this situation? And that's been really cool because previously I felt like I cast myself in the leader role in the marriage. A lot of the time, it's like, I've got to be the rock. And I think a lot of men do this. But what's been really nice is as we've grown together, there's now this equilibrium where it's like we're on a team together and we can both take that leadership role, which means I'm allowed to have my struggle days. I'm allowed to be vulnerable. I'm allowed to have days where I just like throw my hands up in the air and go, I can't do this. And Chev can step up and take the reins, which has been really beautiful for both of us.
Yeah, I love that. So what would you say are some of the practices that you have as a couple to keep your relationship fueled up?
Big ones for us, focusing on shared memories and experiences is a huge one. So what I mean by that, it's like from my perspective and from us as a couple, what we found, we feel deeper in our relationship when we have commonalities. Now, whether that's shared goals, whether that's shared values, whether that's shared memories and experiences, whatever it may be. But a big one for us has been, okay, basically for both of us, we went off and we wrote our own bucket lists, wrote our own goals, like, 100 things style. What are the things that we can actually work on together here? So one, for example, which I'm super excited about, for many years now, we've said that we want to learn how to keep bees in our backyard.
Oh, yeah.
And do our own honey and stuff. And we went away to Mudgee recently with some friends. Again, memory and experience, taking that time away together. We try and do that pretty intentionally about every 3 months or so. But we went out there and went to a place called the Honey Haven. Highly recommend if anyone's out Mudgee way. Brilliant. And I went, we really should do this. And this Sunday, as in 3 days from now, we're doing our first backyard beekeeping class.
Yes.
And we're going to learn how to keep bees together. Right?
I love this so much.
So it's just, we look for things that's like, what's something that we can look back on years from now? Like, remember the time that we just randomly decided we were going to keep bees? And so yeah, that's been a huge one for us.
That is such a great answer. I love that answer so much. Yeah. Because you've chosen to do life with this person. Like, lean in and freaking do life.
Yeah, 100%. And sometimes, there'll be things, again, this comes back to we're both the leaders here. There are things that come up that are more led by Chev. The trip to Mudgee was one of them. She's a lot more into wine than I am. And I went and did all the wine tasting still. And lo and behold, I found one that I don't mind. And then, there's other ones that I'll lead the charge on a bit more and go, hey, this is really important to me. But there's that support of each other's goals, support of each other's passions, support of each other's hobbies. Yeah, and doing it as a team and as a unit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I love that the goals too, like that they're fun things to do together to build your connections, not just like, oh, we want to get a house deposit or something like that. And yes, there is some merit in those sorts of goals too, but there's also some merit in doing some fun things together and things that you've probably never done, like that either of you have done.
Exactly. And I think it comes back to that 2 types of happiness we spoke about earlier, the hedonic and the eudaimonic, right? So yes, something like saving up for a house deposit, really meaningful goal, probably gets a lot of eudaimonic happiness when you do it. Not much hedonic along the way. The act of saving up money is not exciting or enjoyable. You're not going to get a lot of dopamine from that. It feels like a chore.
Yeah.
Whereas something like, hey, let's learn how to keep bees in our backyard. Bit of hedonic pleasure of just being like, well, this seems fun, like a bit, crazy, why not? But for us, the eudaimonic pleasure was more like, we want to be a lot more sustainable in our approach to life. We want to, we found out about how essential bees are as a species. And if they die out, everything's screwed. And we went, well, maybe we can play a bit of a part here and, raise some bees in our backyard and help out the world a bit. So it's got that real meaning and purpose behind it, as well as sort of the fun, right?
Yeah.
And I think they're both important. So if you can get goals that hit both, amazing.
Being the change.
I'd like to think so. I'd hope so.
Yeah. Hey, so you said you've got big goals and big visions. And one of the things that I've heard you talk about is this idea that when Australia decides that the metric of happiness is actually something we're going to track and measure, and we're going to try and actively work towards moving the needle on that you would love for BU coaching to be the place that Australia comes to go, how do we do that, Declan?
Yes, exactly.
So talk to us a little bit about this big goal.
Yeah, and so that, I love that. Thank you for bringing it up. It came off the back of this idea of gross national happiness, which I think a lot of people aren't familiar with. Basically, a lot of countries, ours included, measure GDP, which is basically how profitable and economically viable are our citizens. How's the economy doing, essentially? A few countries have started being like, well, hang on, we can be profitable and make money and be deeply unhappy and unhealthy. Maybe that's an issue.
I can think of a couple countries that maybe.
Yes, right? And so these leading countries started going, well, what if we started measuring gross national happiness, as in how happy and fulfilled and well are our citizens, either alongside or in more extreme cases, in total replacement of GDP. And so Bhutan is the pioneering country on this. They started it 15 years ago. Completely got rid of GDP. What's been really interesting is as they've focused on gross national happiness, it comes back to the age-old saying, what we measure, we can manage. So because they're measuring this, they're putting more effort into improving it. And lo and behold, what have they found? When people are happier and healthier, they're more productive and economically viable. So GDP went up accidentally as a byproduct. This comes back to the success versus happiness argument. Entire countries have got that equation the wrong way around. And so recently, Canada and New Zealand have been talking about starting to measure gross national happiness. Bhutan has been pioneering it like crazy. Interesting, the city of Adelaide a few years ago was like, we're going to be the happiest city in Australia. I would like to contend otherwise, but hey, they're putting in a good push for it. They got the founders of positive psychology to come over and teach basic positive psychology and happiness principles to all public servants. There is this real groundswell now to what if we start focusing more on the happiness and well-being of citizens rather than just their economic viability? And what I would love to see happen, I don't know when this is going to happen, but I would love for Australia to be part of pioneering that. Every year there's an international happiness study that ranks how happy countries are. Australia moved backwards over the last few years. Like, that is a huge problem. Right? So we are going backwards at the moment in our happiness. We are in such a great position. We have a lot of the requirements for happiness here. What we need to now do is be more intentional about leaning into how do we help educate and empower our citizens with the tools, the strategies, the resources required to really be happy and thrive. And I think the beautiful thing is what the research is showing is that pays for itself. So yeah, I would love for us to be in a position where 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is from now.
Hopefully it doesn't take that long.
I was going to say 2 years, whoever the current, some prime minister comes along and goes, hey, we got to get working on this. Actually, funnily enough, because New Zealand announced that they're going to start leaning into it, I sent a video message on Instagram to Jacinda Ardern the other day.
Yes, do you want me to send one too? Everyone should send one.
Everyone start video messaging Jacinda Ardern and say, hey, we've got someone who can help you with the gross national happiness of New Zealand. Because I was like, let's talk.
Let's get a grassroots guerrilla campaign going here, Declan. Yeah. And then we know whatever New Zealand does, we will try and copy here.
Ideally, that's the aim.
Yeah.
Hey.
So Declan, you've got a happiness scorecard which people can actually jump in and do themselves, don't you?
Correct. Yeah, that was one of our first questions was if we're going to measure gross national happiness of an entire country, I mean, how do we do that? And I looked around and went, there's not even really an evidence-based, practical way for people to measure their happiness as individuals yet. Like, it comes back to what we measure, we can manage. No wonder so many people are reactive with their happiness. They don't know where it's at till it hurts. That's why our mental health and emotional well-being approach in Australia, don't get me wrong, I think there's amazing work being done there, but I think we're so stuck in the rut of being reactive and waiting till people are really in a place of struggle before we step in and try and help. That needs to change. I think the way it changes is by people seeing where they're at before things start to hurt. So we, about a year ago, sat down and went, can we build an evidence-based scorecard that people can take in like 5 minutes that will tell them there are 2 different types of happiness, the hedonic and eudaimonic that we've spoken about in this episode. They're internal factors that affect happiness, they're external. Their top 3 happiness contributors, so what they're doing really well, and their top 3 happiness growth opportunities. So if you focus on these, your score will go up, as well as their overall score. And then ideally, people take it every 6 months and they see how happiness changes over time. And thankfully enough, we actually took that through an incubator with the University of Newcastle, started rolling it out. We were very fortunate enough to get our very first grant towards it for the research. And we decided that forever and for perpetuity, we were going to make it, because we believe happiness should be accessible to all, something that we roll out for free forever. And also, which I know you guys are big fans of, we wanted it to make a difference not only to the people using it, but to someone who may never get the opportunity to use it. So every time someone does their happiness scorecard, we actually provide a day of seeds to feed someone in need in Malawi.
We love this project.
Yeah, so it's just a way of going, hey, I'm going to learn more about my happiness for myself. I'm going to learn how to increase my happiness, which not only affects me, but it affects those around me, as I shared in my story and what we see in the research. And it's going to help someone that I'll never meet, who may never have the opportunity to jump on their iPhone or on the computer and take their happiness scorecard.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Love everything, Declan.
Thank you.
And to immortalize my current happiness scorecard in podcast form, I took the quiz today. I took the assessment today, and my overall happiness score is a 77.
Hey.
Yeah, with my growth opportunities for happiness are my connection to family, physical health, and hobbies and passions. Whereas what I'm nailing is my sense of growth and progress, my general sense of happiness, and my romantic relationships.
Oh, that's good.
Hey, how good is that to see? That's a good one.
Yeah, so that feels
It would have been awkward if that came up in the growth opportunities when we're on this side.
So thank you so much for giving me a jumping off point or a way to articulate that and a really nice framework to work with. So I totally encourage everyone to go and take this scorecard. Where can they do that, Declan?
So their best bet is to go to happiness-scorecard.com.au. Nice and easy to remember. And they can just download it straight from there. As I said, it's free. It's about 7 minutes to use. It sends you your full report that you get to keep. And then if they do want to learn about growing their score, once a month we run a free online masterclass called Hacking Happiness, which is a chance to jump on a live session for about 90 minutes. And we go through the first 3 fundamental tools to growing your happiness scores. We do that once a month free. We take about 20 to 25 people at a time in it. And if once people take their scorecard, they'll see an invitation to come along to the masterclass.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. We've had an amazing chat. There's so many more questions I want to ask you. So I think you might be coming back with Chev for round 2. Hopefully we can encourage her.
I've been wanting to get Chev on a podcast for years, so I would love that.
Yeah, well, the invite's coming.
Fantastic.
But in the interim, thank you so much for joining us. We talked so much about being the change and taking accountability for ourselves and our own happiness and well-being, and the relationship with ourselves really setting the tone for every other relationship that we have. But we also want to be the change that we want to see in the world with those B's, but the big, big world. So to say thank you for joining us, we've given 100 days of medication to nursery school students in Ethiopia.
Hey, amazing.
So getting their health set from early on is fundamental for the rest of their life. So thank you so much for making that possible.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
So Declan, you've already mentioned your scorecard. If people want to connect with you, how should they do that?
So their best bets is I have 2 podcasts that they can listen to. So one is called Be You with Declan Edwards. It's letters Be You with Declan Edwards. It's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere they get podcasts. That's the one that's on individual happiness and well-being. And then we have with my head of systems and strategy at BU, so our second in command, we have a new podcast called Working Well, which is about workplace happiness and well-being and more leadership and culture change. So those are great ones to check out. Other than that, main socials, obviously on Facebook, search BU Coaching, and on Instagram, they can go to Declan Edwards _BU or BU _coaching.
Awesome, Declan. Amazing. This has been rad.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.